next 4 sessions are going to be broker led because some of the conversations we start to get into broker advice and start to talk about transactional things. So you'll have myself, Anne, or Susan leading the broker sessions. And in some of these sessions, also, we find that the material can lead to some other dialogue and questions and things. So if you do have questions, please speak up and we will go through them and talk about different scenarios, etc. So this is one of my favorite sections to teach. So we're going to talk about win the seller today. Let's see if my clicker goes through here. So the first thing we're going to talk about is qualified sellers. And what that means is that they're ready to do business in the short term. So that would be 14 days or less. So it means they're financially able to transact now. And if you want to capture A sellers, you need to follow up with them daily to make sure that you're first secure the appointment and then move from the appointment, the listing agreement is the next step. The other thing about listings, as you'll see, and we've got a mixture of those who've been in the business and those who are new. Those who have been in the business will tell you listings are a great resource, not just to sell the house, but the leads that come from the listing that you can generate. So that's why as we go through this, you'll see we talk a lot about that as well. So the triangle, this is the 3 L's of the MREA. So for those new to KW, you'll find that we have a lot of abbreviations. So MREA is the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. That's the red book, we often call it, which Gary Keller, Jay Papasan, and Dave Jenks wrote. And in the MREA, you'll hear a lot of conversation and modeling around leads, listings, leverage, and that's what the triangle is. So the idea is that leads want to convert into listings, and then you want to leverage that listing to, obviously, you want to sell the listing, first goal, but the other goal should be to leverage that listing to get more business. That's why listings are so important. That's going to take us right into the next part, which we just covered a little bit. Seller listings mean marketing opportunities. It means you have more control over your time. So for those who experienced the crazy COVID market, where we didn't really have control of our time because everything was selling so quickly and your showings had to be at one point we were showing houses in 15-minute increments, weren't we, Umi? So you were literally lined up out the door to go in, like kind of like an assembly line. And so that kind of market makes it very especially when you're dealing with buyers and you're in such a seller's market. It makes it very difficult to leverage the listing because they're just selling so fast that you can't do anything with it. You know, as soon as it hit the market at that point, you were holding offers, and you know you had multiple offers. Right? You had, yeah. I think it was one of the 40 was the record for the market center. It was in that 40 to 50 was on one listing. Yeah. So I mean, and there's pros and cons to every kind of market, and in that market, it was great to be a seller. But as an agent, it was challenging, and I know at points we've had some of our colleagues from Toronto come down and teach sessions, and of course they have experienced markets like that. But in Nova Scotia, we had never experienced a market like that ever. So until COVID, and so when you're dealing with a market like that, it makes it very challenging as an agent because you can't leverage your listings because they're selling so fast. And any buyers you have, you ended up with a long list of buyers, and you couldn't get you were having trouble getting them a house because the supply was so low, the competition was fierce. And no matter how many times you wrote like this beautiful letter and you wrote over ask and you know, waived a bunch of conditions, you still didn't necessarily win in the competition. So the market we're in now is much better for both sides. And depending on area right now, if you're checking the stats, you know, overall HRM, and Nova Scotia wide, we're still in a seller's market, but we've gotten closer to balanced. And that makes it a little bit more of an even playing field. Now, obviously, it's very area and price point dependent. So if you're in HRM and you're on the peninsula or, you know, out in the suburbs, your price, if you're a single family priced under 600, you're still competing offers right now. But if you're in that higher end price point, you're not. So it's very price point and area dependent. And I know some of you are in other areas of the province. PEI is the same, like sort of Charlottetown core, certain price points, but it depends on the price point, the area, right now. So it's all the more important to make sure that you're keeping up with the stats and the market conditions and what's going on, because that plays into pricing the house properly when you're dealing with sellers and going for that listing. So I know that this is a little bit of an offshoot, but does everybody know where the market stats icon is on Paragon? Yes, I know, Chris, you're Chris is our tech video guru over there. So just it's very important to make sure as part of your listing process, as part of your competitive market analysis when you're doing a CMA, is that you're up to date on the stats for that area. So make sure that, like, if you go into market stats, you can drill down to the data so that you're not getting just the broad area. You can actually make it specific to the district. So if, say here, we'll use the market center as an example, say here in Bedford, we have, are you okay with me? If we were listing a condo upstairs, for example, we would want to make sure that we're checking the market stats for area 20 specifically and condos versus single family. Condo and single family are going to be different. And then using that as your ammunition and background into how you're going to price. You're following the trend and the current stats of what's happening in that market area. Make sense to everybody? Okay. You're okay? An address for what? Yeah, you're not going to get it specific for the address. You have to search by district. So you would break it down. But yeah, we can do that. We can do that at the end, and I can show everybody if you're not clear on how to do that. To get in there, do that. Absolutely. Okay, so listings maximize your per hour compensation. That's the leverage piece. You can do more volume in listings than buyers. We just chatted about that as well. And then you're on the front end of pricing creates an intimate knowledge of the market, which we just talked about. And properly marketing listings brings you more business. So again, marketing the listing there's a lot of elements to that. There's not just the physical, like the sign. There's a lot of social media aspects and elements to that now as well. Open houses is a traditional one. We're starting to see a lot of open houses happening again everywhere because that's a piece to sell the listing. Also, when you're sitting at an open house, it's an opportunity to earn more business because often if buyers are coming through an open house and they're not already represented by an agent, and you should always ask if they're working with an agent. But if they are not, they're interviewing, coming around open houses. If they're looking or they're considering to get into the market and they're looking to make a purchase, they will interview at an open house. And if they like you and they see you're knowledgeable and personable, you're kind of auditioning for the role as their realtor. So always keep that in mind as well. You're not necessarily just there to sell the house. You are, but there's another element to it. So there's a 7-step seller cycle. And so this model is proven to reap the most success for sellers, and success comes in any market, as we've talked about. So the first one is lead conversion. So that means lead generation and lead follow-up. So that's you guys have already gone through the lead gen, lead follow-up. So you want to make sure that you have some sort of system. Command is great for that, to make sure that you're following up. You're first of all generating leads. Secondly, you're following up on those leads. The second is pre-listing, so transaction today in particular. Then the listing consultation, which is a transaction today. And servicing and marketing, so that's once we get into sort of day 16 into transact and working with buyers and sellers. And then offers and negotiations, so that's again transact. So we're into sort of a day 17, 18 in the cycle. Contract to close, again, that's part of the transaction. And then post-close systems is a follow-up to the transaction. So the important thing is to make sure, first of all, when you're generating the lead, that you're showing value to the lead and then following up on the lead. So converting your A sellers, first obviously respond right away. Longer you leave a lead, sort of that lead time lagging, less likely you're going to convert the lead. Get valid and complete contact information and save it to command and create an opportunity. So making sure you're asking for all of that information when you talk to the person. Determine their motivation to sell so you can speak to it. This is a really important one. Some sellers are highly motivated, more so than others. So when you're doing your consultation, you want to make sure you're asking the right questions so that you're drilling down to what their motivation is. If they're moving because they have a job transfer and they're supposed to be in Toronto in 4 weeks, that's a very motivated seller, and that's going to impact how they're going to respond to pricing, offer, close date, all of those things. So you want to make sure that you're asking the right questions. Same thing. Often you'll find if it's job, family, circumstance, are two really highly motivated sellers. So make sure that you're asking the questions when you're dealing with sellers. And then you always want to bring things back to that motivation. So in your conversations with them, that's part of your dialogue with them when you're having conversations. And then obviously set the appointment. You want to make sure that you actually set a specific time and date for as soon as possible if you've had your initial conversation with them. And one philosophy on setting the appointment time is to give them an option, like 2 options, rather than like, oh, I can come, anytime on Thursday. Say, I can do Friday at 4 or Saturday at 2, which works better for you. Give them 2 options and have them pick one. Getting an appointment. Oh, next slide. So getting to an appointment is about letting sellers know that you're going to be the agent that fulfills their needs in the transaction. So this is a survey based on a NAR profile of home buyers. And essentially, this is what sellers said they wanted from their agent. So 27% said they used their realtor previously. And so they had a very good fiduciary relationship with that seller. But you'll see there's help price the home competitively, help seller market the home to potential buyers, help sell the home within specific time frame, help seller find ways to fix up the home and sell it for more, and then other. And most of these stats, they've done this. NAR is really good about surveying clients. So they publish data pretty much annually, and you don't see a whole lot of swings in the results. Pretty consistent all the way through. So although this is from 2021, wouldn't expect a huge change in that. And we've seen more updated data than this slide that basically shows the same thing.
So others
Um, others typically we hear in negotiation a lot, like negotiate favorable terms. Sometimes you'll have like and staging. You'll have yeah, it's like smaller things, so they just kind of group them all together because they didn't as a whole they add up to a significant number, but there's not one singular. Okay, so the next one is building confidence and trust. So what are some of the ways you can build confidence and trust with sellers? I think. To be personable. So connecting with them is important. Building that relationship is very important. And part of that is makes them feel more comfortable. So if you are working at building that rapport and that relationship with them, then they're going to feel more comfortable, you know, basically selling their largest asset with you. So you want to make sure you build that relationship. And your focus during the process is not to sell them. If you go in trying to like sell, often has the opposite effect you want. More about providing value. And oftentimes providing value is being able to demonstrate your knowledge, your ability, guidance that you can provide. So that's very important. So that you're projecting confidence and that you're there to help them through the process. Okay, so these are the 7 close to appointment tactics. So the first one is show the benefits. So obviously that's easy enough to do. The next one is the take back close, the negative positive close. Give them what they're looking for, the trial close, the assumptive close, and tie downs. So the idea is to make sure you don't leave any conversation without asking for the appointment multiple times. So, and I think a lot of agents kind of get hung up on this is they're afraid to get a no. And a no is not necessarily a bad thing. A no might be just not now. No might not just be a flat no. So I think that it's important to also sure you're going in with the right mindset that a no might not always be a no. And a lot of it So from your earlier sessions at Ignite, you would have talked about your value proposition and what your unique value proposition is. And so part of that in your presentation with your sellers is to make sure that you're also demonstrating what your unique value proposition is and what you bring to the table for them to work with you. Make sense? Um, and so some of these tie downs specifically, has anybody heard about tie downs before? Yeah, Chris, you have. Anybody else? So tie downs talk about your tonality and your conversation. So instead of talking in an upward swing, so it almost sounds like the end of my sentence is a question. So if I were to say, Chris, it would be great if you would list with me today, see the upswing, right? Instead of Chris, it would be great if you would list with me today. Tie down has a downswing, so it's about the tonality, and then the tie down itself is when you use something like, I heard that you're really motivated to get to Toronto so that you can start your job on June 1st. Wouldn't it be advantageous for us to get the photographer booked so that we can get your house on the market in the next week, that you can be in Toronto to start your job on June 1st? That was the tie. There was the tie down in there. Is the wouldn't it, the downswing.
A really common one in sales is the market's really hot right now, so what makes sense now, wouldn't you agree? Simple things like that.
Yeah,
And put some in a little cul-de-sac, like, I don't wanna say no, it looks good.
yeah,
I don't agree, it's good.
exactly. Yeah. So if you want practice with using tie downs, there are some great videos on KW Connect. There's a whole section in the Bold course where you would practice doing tie downs with each other as part of an exercise. It's a great thing to just start to train yourself in how you converse. So that, wouldn't it, couldn't it, shouldn't it, don't you agree? Um, those kinds of verbiage in your the way you talk to people really does help um, get them moving forward. And it's not that you're manipulating the conversation, you're just helping move the conversation forward so that they're arriving to the decision that they're going to make sooner. Okay? And don't know if it was in this section or it might be in one of the others. But we also talk a lot about mirroring and matching. Covered that yet? You did that. Okay. Yeah, so that's important too, especially when you're looking to do the closing tactics. So if you're dealing with, and we talk about the DISC profile, which is personality profiles a lot. So if you're dealing with a high D like me, if you start to like come at me with all this stats and numbers and you drag the thing on for an hour, I'm like, no, let's get to the point now, right? Like that's like, so it's important to know personality style you're dealing with in your seller, because you can mirror and match how they want to be presented to. If you're dealing with a C, like if I have my broker hat on, obviously my compliance is a much higher and I'm more detailed. So if I'm a C, I want all of the stats. I want you to give me every single stat. I want to see it broken down in front of me. I've probably already gone online and looked at all of the comparables, and I'm going to say to you, well, Umi, this house has 200 less square feet than mine. Why is mine worth less? Like that's the kind of detail, right? That's the kind of detail a C is going to bring to you. So it's important to make sure that you are aware of what personality your style, your potential seller is and how they like to be communicated with. Because if you go in there with, your 30 pages of presentation material and they're a D, they want you to just read them the summary page. But if they're a C, they want all 30 pages of that presentation and they want all the details and all the market stats and are going to bring up price per square footage and they want to know days on market. They want to know all the things. So it's important to know that when you're dealing with an I likes more of the tangible, like pretty things. So like, oh, are you going to help me with staging and getting my house prepped and looking great? Okay, fabulous. And S is more steady. So in S, you'll find I'll have some elements of C and some elements of I often, a little bit of both. So if you're not familiar with DISC, we are going to run DISC. I don't have the date right in front of me, but I think we've got it on the June calendar. I will be teaching DISC. And if you haven't done your own DISC and you're curious about what you are, part of that course is we will send you the link. We have the DISC. We subscribe to it for the Market Center. So we will send you the link so you can complete your own DISC. And then the idea is that you'll bring that to the course and we'll go through sort of the standard personality traits and what each one means. But that's just like a very brief summary. But it's important. The reason I bring it up is it is important not only with the mirroring and matching, but to know what personality style the person is. So you're properly communicating with them. So we
Then based on tend to do a combination.
Oh, always. Yeah. When we just said for those of you online, people are often a combination of two, and that's 100% correct. So typically you lead with one style and then you have a second style that is often very close. And then typically you have two that are more dominant and then the other two out of the four are very low. So you'll see often combinations. We'll see common combinations based on, you can start to see trends and people's occupations. You know, engineers tend to all be C's and S's. Accountants, actuaries, anybody who's like into very analytical type professions often present in a certain way versus, you know, artists, musicians, things like that often tend to be I's. Anyway, it's very interesting when you get into studying some of that stuff. But anyway, I digress, but it's an important point. Just make sure that you're considering that as well when you're going for your point speaking with people.
June the 10th.
June 10th. Thank you, Chris. I knew it was June. Okay, so questions versus objections. So when a question is asked, obviously answer it. That's straightforward. When an objection comes up, you want to make sure you address it. So often a seller might be asking a question, but you may hear it as an objection. So just also make sure that when you're listening, you're discerning that difference. So if a client says, "What is your commission?" That as a question doesn't necessarily mean they're objecting to it. They're asking a question. So just answer it. If they then ask you if you would reduce your commission, then answer the question again. If they persist, and that's when you start to get into your other, and we're not saying scripting anymore, but you can practice your conversations and your dialogues with fellow agents. If you're a new agent, you're in coaching, Jill is a great resource for you to practice with. But sometimes you'll hear, this is an example in the material, which is a very common one. Another agent will list my house for X. And you can respond by saying, "I hear you saying the commission you pay is important to you. I'm happy you brought it up. I'd love to cover that when we meet." Also, the idea is that your pre-listing package that you're going to deliver or have delivered to them before you arrive for the appointment is going to handle a lot of that those objections that may come up when you actually meet with them. The commission one also from a broker perspective, just make sure you're also aware of some of the phrasing you're using in that. So, I talked a lot about the lawsuits in the States last year, and how the industry has changed in the US. One of the main things in the US versus Canada is a lot of the states didn't already have buyer representation agreements. So they didn't have, like, we've had BDBAs here, or a version of a BDBA, for years, right? We've had mere postings for years. In the US, in many states, that wasn't the case. So that also is an important element if you did follow, a lot of the news around that. But what is important, and what is the same here in Canada versus the States, is we do still have to make sure that we are following the laws and the rules around the Competition Act. And that means that commissions, when the question comes up, commissions are negotiable. Now, you as an individual business owner or team can set your commission, and it is what it is. And maybe you're not negotiable, maybe you are, depending on the situation, client, property, etc. You cannot at any time make any reference to an industry standard, or that's the normal, that's what everybody, like, that kind of wording cannot say. So that's sort of my asterisk around commission, and if you're dealing with commission objections. So make sure, so if you're presented with, Region X will do it for, X%, and I'm not going to say what it is, because there are different brokerage models, and it's fine. People can choose to work in a model that suits them. What you can say is, I appreciate what you're saying, but I work for a full service brokerage and I provide full service. And as I am about to demonstrate, because often when you get this, because either you haven't fully gone through your presentation yet, so sometimes you can just divert them back to your presentation and say, look, we're going to address this as we go through my presentation, and you'll see all of the value and service I provide and why my commission is X, versus just letting it kind of turn into a negative. There's a way to do that and make it a positive and show your value without negatively speaking about another brokerage or the industry as a whole. Make sense? Is everybody clear on what I mean? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So you could say, I provide service and value for my clients, and this is, these are the services and value I provide. And as you are going to see in my presentation, as we go through it, I think you'll find your question is answered. And then you can go into your presentation. I provide professional photography, I provide staging, I will help you stage, or I will provide advice on movers, inspectors, storage, whatever it is, right? Like, everybody's going to have different values and things that they bring to the table, but it's important to make sure how you're communicating it. And if you are looking for more practice on how to demonstrate value, the Value Squared course on KW Connect is fantastic. So that was a course that was done live last year, I think. And that was in response to all of the things happening in the industry in the US. But the explanations and the phrasing and everything that they were going through is all applicable to us, because we have already gone through the Competition Act here, and that's how we ended up with mere postings. So it's very applicable to us, and so that course is fantastic. If you're looking for more practice and tactics on how to deal with objections and demonstrating your value to a seller, highly recommend you go on and take the time to go through that course. It's great. And we had quite a few people here that did it when it was live, and it's one of the best courses KW has put together.
Commission thing comes out. Time.
Yep.
So I just developed basically a one sentence thing. Either if they say, like everyone else works, they ask,
Mhm.
what's the standard? I just, like you said, I
Yeah.
said, there is no standard.
Yes.
It's Nova Scotia actually, what most locations won't tell you, but listen, that commission is completely negotiable, and I might charge a little bit more. The people that talk to you, but once we meet, I'll tell you why. One sentence.
Yeah.
And like, oh, okay, 24. There was like, well, you'll lose.
Yeah. And that's exactly how to handle it. And then I know. And it's the same thing, like this is not new in the industry for those who've been in, like I've been in the industry for so many years. Like this is a constant thing. So it's all about demonstrating your value. And years ago in some of the earlier training, we had the example of, placing 4 quarters on the table in front of the seller and saying, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, well, here's my 4 quarters, which represents total commission. This one goes to marketing. This one goes to my brokerage. This one goes to what was the third one? Marketing, brokerage. I have to look up that script again. Marketing, brokerage, taxes. Oh, I forget CRA. Don't forget CRA ever. They'll come calling. Anyway, and the 3. So all I have left is this 1 quarter for my profit. Which of the other 3 do you want me to get rid of? Because I have to pay taxes. So then I'm either getting rid of the marketing, the only quarter I have left to play with. So I can offer you less services and less marketing, get rid of one of the quarters, right? It's a very old school way to explain it, but sometimes reframing it in that way helps people, especially someone who's visual, more of a visual learner, to have something like that. But Chris, your point, that's exactly how to handle that.
Just keeps it good.
Yeah.
I haven't encountered it.
You will, 100% you will. And again, it's all about answering it. Don't be afraid that it's going to come up, because it will. So it's just being prepared and how to respond to it.
I've been seeing 4, 2.5 facade, 2 in fire now. That
It's a mixture of everything going on. Sometimes you'll see, years ago when we were in a buyer's market and we had listings sitting, our average days on market were up over 100 days, and you couldn't, like, showings were not happening. We had the reverse happen, where you were having people offer 3% on the buying side to try to encourage buyer agents who want to show and sell your listing over all of the other ones that were on the market. So it just depends on what's happening in the market. It's a simple economics, right? Supply and demand, and as far as what's happening. So sometimes you'll see the buyer commission offered more. Sometimes you'll see it the same. Sometimes you'll see it less. It's really all over the place now. You'll see.
It's kind of like Greater Halifax, it's about 2, you get outside of that, it's 2.5.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I've seen 3 in the city.
You will, and you'll see then again, if you're trying to make it a little more competitive, that is a strategy that some agents and sellers will use to try to entice more action on their property, especially if it's in a slower moving point or area. It's interesting. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about, as far as objections, commission's the first one. Just before we move on, the second most common one you'll hear is around pricing. So making sure, like we said, like I talked about earlier, making sure you're up to date on your stats specifically for that area. And making sure when you go through your CMA on the property that you're demonstrating why the pricing is where it is. And when you couple that with what's happened in the market versus what the current market conditions are, really makes it very simple for them to see why the pricing is the way it is. But you need to make sure that you're prepared for facing objections too, because that would be your other most common one that you'll hear. Any questions on that?
There's so much company right now at the bar.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard. I find
Yeah.
it opposite cost. There's always somebody waiting.
Yeah, it's more important than ever, demonstrate your value and
It's very hard to demonstrate the value.
Yeah.
You don't undercut, there's always someone waiting. I listing recently by what they think that two other realtors, after I had a signed listing, went and put their lock boxes on my listing.
what?
First throw them under the bus, but I had to call them and say, you cannot put your lock boxes on my listing, I have a signed list.
So in that situation, I know you dealt with it, but in that situation, you should bring that to the broker level because we would speak to their broker about that. That's not acceptable.
Even at escalate.
Yeah.
I had to deal with.
Okay.
They're just too much.
Professionalism in the industry is so important. And unfortunately, we are seeing more of that than we ever used to.
It's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting as we go through the different cycles, and real estate is cyclical, as you know, you'll see that in Ignite. We have, you know, on average, your real estate cycle, the research has shown, it cycles through on average about every 7 to 10 years. So you'll see the cycles, right? And you can see it. It's very easy to graph it out. So yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently had a viewing on a property that is away, there's an accommodation lockbox. The HRA. Out of courtesy, I called the HRA.
Yeah.
Let them know that you cannot have a combination lockbox. And he said, yes, I can. And I was like, why don't you check it with your broker? And so I don't need to. So I said, fine, you do your real estate your way. I was inside the house, he called me and he said, get out, I don't want you to show my property. And I was 100% in the bed.
You are 100%. Yeah.
100%. So I'm
So just to Umi's point, if you are in HRM, you cannot put a combination lockbox on a listing in HRM. You need to use the Supra
myself.
blue box. If you're in the Valley, cannot put a blue box on a listing. You have to put a combination because the Valley does not subscribe to the Supra iBoxes. That's the only area in HRM. So making sure you're aware of the rules around it's allowable not. Oh, I know.
It's crazy. The
Yeah.
lack of professionalism, all lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
Most of the brokerages have no training whatsoever.
It's not tangent too, but can we be in the problem because we ourselves in a problem situation? Because NHRM is like text H for door code. Showed it. Is that putting us in any weird scenario? Or it's not super, or is that just that's just the allegations problem?
Yeah, that would be on the listing agent because they are providing the door code for, I mean, and it also, there's the element that you can't track who accesses. It's a rare situation where a house is accessed without an appointment, but it happens. And when you're the listing agent and it's happened to your seller and someone has accidentally gone into the house, whether they thought they had an appointment and it wasn't confirmed, or this has happened and we've had this happen in the brokerage. If there's multiple houses for sale on the same street, agents sometimes make mistakes. I mean, we're all human. Nobody's perfect. And we've had that happen where, you know, they went into 45 instead of 65. And the nice thing about the super boxes is it does track who accesses. So if someone does access the property when they were not supposed to or were not confirmed, you can go back into your log for your lockbox and see who accessed. So there is that element of security. So Chris, to your question, Chris was just saying if you give out the door code, if your seller is okay with it, can do that. I've also seen often agents will put the combination, the blue super boxes on properties that have the combination door code, but they put the code in the lockbox. So you have to physically open the box. On the piece of paper, it says door code is blah, 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 and then you punch in the code so that there's still a record in the box.
That's correct. There are sometimes sellers, they change the code for every view.
Yes.
And then that's why they say call the agent.
Yeah, because they will change the code. And the same thing is similar with alarm codes too. My personal preference is the alarm code is off because from a buying agent perspective, it's always very stressful trying to get in to find a keypad and turn it off and all of that. And from a seller's perspective, you really shouldn't be giving out a seller's alarm code to another industry member. Security wise, it's not a great thing to do. So what I would recommend as one of your brokers is if you've got a seller that really wants to make sure the house is armed, maybe they're away, maybe they're not a full-time resident here, you know, there's various situations. I would manage that yourself to give the alarm code. That's my personal thing. So if a seller has an alarm code and they want to keep the alarm on for showings, I would go turn it off first before buying agent got there, so they didn't have to deal with it. And I didn't give my seller's alarm code to someone. It just keeps the security a little tighter and it makes it a nicer showing experience for the buying agent, so they're not all stressed trying to turn an alarm. Because it's never fun when you set an alarm off by mistake and police come, and I can speak from experience, it's not enjoyable. So you want to make it as pleasant as possible for the agent showing and their clients. Thing to keep in mind. Okay, next up, we're going to talk a little bit about the E2P approach. So this is from the 6 Personal Perspectives course, which is a great sort of foundational course that KW has. And we talk a lot about in that course moving from E to P. So E to P is from entrepreneurial to purposeful. And what that means is everybody has a natural feeling of achievement. And when you're entrepreneurial, often you'll hit that natural ceiling of achievement and you won't break through it and go to the next level. When you're coming from a more purposeful mindset, you're working in a more purposeful way, helps you break through that ceiling of achievement so that you're able to go to the next level. And then as you're at that next level, you'll hit another ceiling of achievement and then the cycle continues. So that's one of the things that we talk about. And as far as listings, is making sure that you're continually evolving your presentation and what you're doing for your listing. So what you might have had, 5-10 years ago might need to be revamped for current market situation and what's going on. So making sure, like your pre-listing package, your CMA, your presentation, everything is updated. You're keeping things current so that you're moving from entrepreneurial to purposeful. So the pre-listing packet goals, and the idea is that it's a pre-sells you to the seller, and it helps build confidence, also answers questions, and it will get rid of some of those objections that they're going to have. So that makes your presentation often go quite a bit smoother with them because you've they've already gone through a lot of that information. It helps them to understand how you're going to guide them through the process. It demonstrates that to them. So it also demonstrates your value. It also saves time. And again, just talked about value. Some of the things in the pre-listing package, you want to make sure that some people like to review the pre-listing package in the presentation. Some feel it eliminates the need for a listing consultation. I don't necessarily agree with that. It's more to give them more information about the value you're going to provide and how you're going to guide them. And there still could be questions that come up as a result of the pre-listing package. We're going to go through what a typical pre-listing package would have in it on the next. So that's just a sample on the slide there. So you want to aim to keep it less than 10 pages. If you give them a really thick book, you're going to lose them and they're just going to throw it on the counter or on their desk and not go through it. Should have a cover page. It should have your contact information, a promise to the seller, selling process overview, general pricing information, or value proposition, broker office or personal metrics, client testimonials, previous listings, and then any ancillary services. So if you've got an established relationship, say with a mortgage broker, you might put that information in your pre-listing package as well. It's really important to make sure that you proofread it, make sure there's no errors, make sure, often you'll see that they're done on, nicer quality paper, color, all of that, because it's a document that you want them to take the time to read and review. So the seller consultation preparation checklist. So the first thing you're going to do is deliver your pre-listing package. The second step is to confirm your appointment date, time, and location. And you should follow up to confirm the appointment and ask any questions that you may have missed on the initial call. And ideally, you should meet at their house because that's what you're going to be listing. If you don't know the people or you've never met them before, it's also a good idea to make sure that someone knows where you're going, sure you're safe. If you have any sort of bad vibes, obviously if you're not on a team, take a fellow agent with you. Don't take any risks, I guess is what I will say from that perspective. Ensure all decision makers attend. So you want to make sure all decision makers will be present at the appointment. If your seller answered with more than their name on the lead sheet question, who all is involved in the selling decision, request that all parties be present at the appointment. It's important because often if there's spouses or two people are going to be there, but only one can be there for the appointment. Sometimes you'll have to go back and repeat your whole presentation for the second person. So often it's easier if you have both people there, if there are two or more. You could see more than that, two as well. Complete and practice your listing presentation. Have all your listing materials prepared and printed for the appointment, including your listing agreement. Review the lead sheet. So go over the lead sheet right before your consultation so the seller's profile and goal are clear in your mind. Arrive to the listing presentation in a professional manner. Be there on time, dressed appropriately, and consider the quality of your materials and cleanliness of your vehicle, if applicable, as an extension of your reputation and image. So again, it's like I said, at an open house, you're being interviewed, even though you may not think you're being interviewed. It's the same thing on a listing or a market evaluation appointment. You're being interviewed for the job. So make sure that you're presenting yourself professionally. Obviously, the goal is to get a signed listing agreement. So you want to make sure that you're creating a good impression. You're sharing your price recommendation based on the initial list price for their property and the reasoning behind it. So that's where you're going to get into some of those stats. And it's also make sure that the seller understands they're going to actually be the one to determine the list price. Is their home, so they're the ones that are going to at the end of the day make the decision on the price. You're going to give them your advice and your recommendation. And then make sure you set expectations on how you will market the home and how you will work with the sellers. So it's important that with the expectations with a seller, you clarify how the communication is going to work. Some sellers really like to be texted. Some might want to be called. Some might want to be emailed. So make sure you have that conversation with them. Also make sure that you talk about frequency of communication. So now that we have some listings that are on the market longer and our days on market are on average higher than they were, you want to make sure you set the expectations. So, are you providing them with a weekly update? Are you providing them with, a weekly email with stats? Are you providing them with kits from their website or from, say, you're running a Facebook ad and campaigns? Are you going to give them the feedback on what that ad achieved? So just set expectations with them, and then very important that you live up to those expectations. So don't tell them you're going to call them once a week and then not call them once a week. That's then when you have a very frustrated and unhappy client. That's not what you want. So the other thing there's been a lot of conversation around, especially our Facebook group and online, is showing feedback. And so that's the other thing, is make sure you now set the expectation with the seller that soon we will receive feedback on showings. It's usually, within 24 hours of a showing. But there are some instances where we don't receive feedback from the client or the agent, and that your role and your job is to that feedback, and that you will reach out to the agent to get the feedback so that you have it. And sometimes no feedback is feedback, but often sellers appreciate hearing feedback even if it is negative, because often if it's something that they can change, you've got a motivated seller, they very well go and change whatever it is want to. So I just want to make sure everyone really make sure you set that expectation with sellers. And we used to see feedback come in on it pretty much every showing. Now, again, there's I don't know, in the industry, we're not seeing that happen as much right now. So, we always, what we've said, out of respect for our fellow KW agents, that we should at minimum be giving feedback on our own listings to each other. And think that as far as, raising the bar in the industry, it's important that we as agents are giving our fellow industry members the feedback, because if I'm giving you feedback on your listing, I would appreciate you doing the same for me. Reciprocal respect. So, we've had a lot of conversations around that recently, and I think that it's important. There's a way to give feedback without being at the detriment to your client. Obviously, if you're giving showing feedback and it's, the layout didn't work for them, or they're looking for a more open concept, or they didn't like why, whatever it is, that's fine. That doesn't hurt your client to give other agent that feedback. Obviously, can't comment on specifics around your client, so there's client confidential information that shouldn't get passed. Just general feedback about the house or why it didn't fit or why it didn't work for them, or, the basement had a really musty smell. You might want to run a dehumidifier down there. Helpful feedback. And if I'm a listing agent, I would like to have that feedback to give to my seller. So there's value in giving feedback, and there's a way to do it that is positive for both sides. So that's my rant on feedback. Um, so the goal, obviously, around getting the signed listing agreement, next up is how the listing presentation meets the seller's wants and needs. So there's an article in on kw.com and Connect around customizing the listing presentation. You can find that under the Ignite reference guide. So if you want to sort of use that as a template, there are templates in Command as well. But you can, in Designs in Command is where that you'll find that. But basically, you want to make sure that you have covered what sellers want, and make sure that each section of your presentation covers those things. So you want to make sure that section addresses the goals that we've just discussed. So part of that is creating a good impression, sharing a price recommendation, setting expectations. And then like that pie chart we thought we reviewed there earlier, make sure that you're covering those items. And then you may want to customize templates to make it to you. It's important that, if there's something specific that you feel is important about what you're going to bring to the table and what you're going to bring to your presentation, that you also make it your own. So this is the Your Needs first page of the listing presentation. The reason this is included is to make sure that client feels relationship with you, and that this part is to help ensure that you're earning that respect and that relationship with them, so that when you present your listing presentation, you should be coming from a place of contribution and engagement. So you should be taking notes, making sure you're listening to them. You're doing all the talking. Chances are you probably haven't asked them all of the questions you need to ask them to make sure you have the information you need to properly help them. So just make sure that you're asking for questions. These are, I don't know if you guys can see that, they're kind of small questions that you should ask your seller. So visualize your dream scenario for selling your home. What is the one thing that has to happen to make that dream scenario a reality? How can I make that happen for you? Why is that important to you? We could ask just one more thing to make this process even better. What would it be? Why is that important to you? So the answers to these questions will guide you in how you should relate to the seller, and how you might need to adapt your strategy, your program based on how they answer the questions. So make sure that you're always asking questions. And sometimes when you ask these questions, you'll come up with answers that surprise you, that you weren't expecting, because every seller's situation is different and every seller has their own motivations. So you might ask these questions and they say, I really want to sell by this time so I can get here right by this time. And but they may say to you, I'm not interested in having an open house. Okay, great. So what if that's the case? You didn't ask the questions, you're not going to know that. So if that's a main piece in your marketing strategy and they don't want an open house, then you're going to have to adapt your strategy. Sense?
Sometimes the tenants don't want it.
Yes, if it's tenant occupied, then you can't do an open house. Yes, aware of. Tenants are a whole other element. Fun one. Yes, but to Umi's point, if you are listing a property that is tenant occupied, you also need to make sure that you're giving the 24 hours minimum notice for tenants. That's a requirement in the Tenancy Act. And you also need to clarify, and that's again part of your questions, who's going to communicate with the tenants for the showings. So does the seller want you as the agent communicating with the tenant directly, or are you communicating with the seller and the seller's communicating with the tenant? That line of communication needs to be clarified, and you absolutely have to have 24 hours notice. And then you need to make sure on your listing addendum that you note that. So it should say right on your listing addendum that minimum 24 hours notice for showings, and you can set it up in showing time. You can stipulate that in your settings so that there's a minimum lead time of 24 hours. So then if you won't even, an agent can't even go in and request the showing on a shorter notice than that. But yes, tenants are tricky. You also then need to ask other questions around what kind of lease they're in, so you know what kind of notice needs to be given. Well, if you're dealing with a tenant situation on a listing and you've never done it before, please, please, please call the broker line. We'll walk you through it because there are different types of leases, like fixed term, and yeah, there's a whole other element when you deal with tenants. So just make sure that you're communicating with us if you've never done that before, so we can walk you through how to do that properly, so that because the most important thing is determining what kind of lease they're in, so you know what kind of notice. And if tenant isn't automatically leaving, then you need to know when and if they can be given notice, if you can provide vacant possession or not. And that's very important to know, because that's obviously going to change a buyer's interest in the property, depending on whether they're looking for the tenant to stay or not. Questions around that? Sorry, I know we went on, but that's an important one. Okay. So I am knowledgeable and caring and the best agent for these clients. They will appreciate my expertise and preparation and choose me to represent them as they sell their home. So this is similar to the one you would have looked at for buyer situations. So the key here is to make sure that you're projecting confidence with your clients. So this is just a screenshot of the opportunities tab in Command. So once you've done your listing presentation and you're moving forward to the next step to actually list the property, then you're going to create the opportunity in Command. And then obviously you can move them through each stage in that opportunity, from cultivate to lead to appointment to active listing. This is what we want. And if you have any questions around Command, Jess is your go-to. She is our Command expert. She can help you with any questions you have on. Okay, so next up, the listing walkthrough. So this just talks about when you arrive to the potential seller's home, it's important to establish yourself as a knowledgeable professional right away. So make sure you greet them, thank them for the opportunity, ask them if you can leave your things in the kitchen while you conduct the home walkthrough. It's also a good idea to compliment something about the house. So, there's something that you can, give some positive feedback on. That's a great idea to help build that rapport and shows that, you see value in their home and what they've done. Often, they've done, upgrades or something unique. That's a good thing to point out. Uh, why? So they're suggesting that you leave things in the kitchen. Any ideas on why they're making that suggestion? Like when you go into the house, asking the seller if you can like leave your things in the kitchen while you walk around. Strategy.
They don't see that, doesn't want it. That's the
Has-
long fuzzy roof.
Yeah,
If you leave your stuff there, take a tour of the house, you'll come back, there's a table and a place to sit. Your presentation, they naturally sit and look away.
exactly. Yeah.
It is a nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cheap little living room.
Exactly. It's the natural flow and where you want to end up. So once you do the tour, you want to end up at the kitchen, able to have a conversation, go through your presentation. Exactly. The other thing, this is an interesting one. I've had different philosophies on this. The suggestion is to do the walkthrough alone so that you can form your own opinion and see things without them distracting you. Now, yeah, when I say I've had different philosophies on this, I know some agents prefer this. They prefer to walk through and not have the seller with them. Now, other agents say, no, I don't like that approach because I want to have that conversation with them as I'm going through. I want them to point out the upgrades or the problems with the house. And if they're not with me as we're going through, I don't learn about those things till later. So it's easier to build that rapport and trust with them also if they're walking around with you. So it's interesting. You'll find that everybody has their own approach and you'll determine what you're most comfortable with. And personally, I like to have the seller walk with me because often he will point out things or I'll see something and you can make a note if they're not with you, and go back and ask them. But it's nice to be able to ask them in the moment. And the other thing I find is that they'll also see your value if you're pointing things out. If there's an intricate heating system in the home and you're familiar with it and it's very unique, and you say, oh, wow, you've got a full heat pump system with the Steffi's ETS built-in backup. That's quite a system. Wow, your power bills must be really, efficient. We then see that value and say, oh, wow, she could market or she or he can market my property properly. They understand the intricacies of my heating system or of my X or Y or Z. So sometimes having them with you is a benefit. So again, everybody will have their own philosophy. I know other agents don't like that. They don't want the distraction and they want to be able to just walk and take their notes and then go back. They have the sellers kind of sit at the table and wait for them to come back. So it's all in what you're comfortable with and how you want to do it. Do both, yeah.
And sometimes.
Yeah.
The home is in disrepair.
Yeah.
Go through and walk through the fire. They're workers.
Next up is whether you get the listing or not, always send the seller a handwritten thank you note after the appointment. Handwritten thing, you'll see that is very common in Ignite. It's also common in the Bold course. The philosophy around that is that we don't see a whole lot of actual physical mail, especially like something that you'd want to open up and So because things are so digital now, that people often don't get a handwritten note anymore. So it adds another element of warmth. Something kind of makes you stand out. So uh, that's a recommendation there, and can be quite successful. I know that, agents have done that. And if you don't get the listing, make sure that you're always coming from a, a cordial place. If you're coming at it from a positive, like, I wish you the best of luck with it, hope everything works out, versus I don't know why you're going to list with that agent. I'm going to do a better job for you, blah, blah, like, right? Right? Yes, exactly. And in all in how you approach it. And if you, exactly your point, Matthew, if not to burn the bridges because it might not sell. And that agent, reason they went with that agent, there could be million reasons, but maybe that agent chose to take it overpriced. And maybe it doesn't sell. And maybe they realize after that they've been on the market for a few months with that agent and it didn't sell, that maybe they should have listened to your price and your recommendations, and now they're going to give you a call and you a go at the price you suggested. Right? So if you burn the bridge, you're not going to get that opportunity. Versus if you come from it from the other angle, you could be the one who gets it after not successful with the other agent. So
So it happened too, where you take an agent, you use the agent, they have miserable experience, tell their friends, well, use that guy, but this Chris was really nice, go talk to you. You never know.
you never know. And it's funny, to your point about them talking to their friends, that is gold also, because if you have a great rapport and they have a great experience with you, they will rave about you. They will tell everybody. Equally, if you're awful or they had a terrible experience with you, they will tell everybody. So you want to make sure that you, even even if something goes negative, that you're always handling it professionally, handling it, you know, with care, so that they still feel, sometimes things go sideways. If once you get the listing and as you move into your next sessions at Ignite, you get into negotiating and dealing with contracts and offers. And when you're into those situations and sometimes can come up with some pretty complicated situations, I'll say. It's important that you handle those with grace and professionalism, and because our values are on the wall. You want to be a win-win for everybody, and that doesn't just mean you and your seller, but it means the buyer and the buyer's agent. It's the whole thing should be a win-win for everyone. And when it feels like it's not, it's often a very negative experience for everybody. And if you can avoid that, that helps also their relationship with you, but also their ability to refer you to all of the family, friends, etc., which is important. That's how you build your business, is through those referrals. All right. Okay, so the listing agreement. Has everybody seen the listing agreement, an SDBA and the addendum? Everybody's familiar. We don't need review listing agreement. Good with that? Okay. So your listing agreement, I'll just kind of highlight the different parts. So you have your SDBA, which is your seller designated brokerage agreement. So that's your 4-page contract, if you will. So it's important that you fill everything out in full on that. So at the top where you have like name, email, phone number, address, all of that needs to be completed for the seller. All of it needs to be completed for the brokerage. You can't have anything blank. So that's the first piece. Then the next piece you'll see, you need to have the PID, the address, the postal code, price, and then in the designated agency section, you'll put your name as the designated agent or your team if you're on a team. And then as far as the rest, it's very straightforward. It's a fill in the blank. If you're new and you haven't done one before, talk to your mentor about doing a mock listing agreement. The best place to start is with your own property as a sample property. Do it up and have your mentor do a quick look over of it and review to give you feedback on where there's room for improvement. And then as part of your listing agreement, you're going to have your addendum, which is the 5 pages that which populate what goes on MLS. So that's where you're going to have room measurements, square footage, lot size, niches, i.e., flooring, roofing, water supply, sewer supply, all of that stuff on there. What I will caution you on is few things, making sure that you measure property, the house. Do not take the measurements from a previous listing cut unless you were the listing agent and you measured it yourself. You need to measure. The liability is on you as the listing agent to have measured the house, verify the room sizes and square footage, and that liability comes back on you. So please make sure you measure the house. Verify the square footage. If you're doing a complicated house, if it's your standard salt box 2-story, it's pretty easy. Length times width, give you the square footage. It's not complicated. If you've got some sort of funky contemporary with all these jogs and jigs and two-story vaulted spaces and things like that, and you need help, if you're a new agent, ask your mentor, help you. If you're an experienced agent and you just need an extra hand, because when you're dealing with a contemporary property that's very unusual, it can be a challenge to have to measure all of that. You can't necessarily just do it with a laser, and you have to get out like your old school tape. You can ask the seller to help you. Often you'll have a seller that doesn't mind helping you do that. You can also bring a fellow agent along, help you as well, or a third party. Exactly. If you're doing Matterport or iGuide, it's very helpful. Just also keep in mind, you are still responsible for C of those measurements. So if you pay someone to go in and do a Matterport or iGuide, still comes back on you. Even though you hired that third party, you hired them. That's your broker hat. Other piece that we have now is the accessibility requirements. So there is another element of measuring or width, thresholds, number of steps, all of that for the accessibility requirements on the listing. You'll see that on the addendum. So making sure you don't do those measurements. They are required fields now. Alicia can't activate your listing. So make sure that on your addendum, any of those required, and you'll see they're bolded or asterisk, they're required fields. They have to be completed or you're going to get your stuff sent back to you. And Alicia's going to say, I need the measurements, or I need the lot size, or I need, X or Y. I can't, and she can't activate it until that information is complete.
What's the new?
So it's the new accessibility requirements. So yes.
They still came about in 24, you license out.
Yeah. So for those of us who are licensed for years, this is another element of measuring that you have to do. So just be aware it takes a little bit more time because you've got to measure more openings, thresholds, all of the things. The idea was to make more easily the information more easily available to those with disabilities or accessibility issues that may be looking for a property where they could, whether it fits without any modifications or that they would be looking to do modifications to the property, they could more easily tell from the initial information whether it was going to be suitable. So then they would then know whether it made sense to book a showing, et cetera. So the idea was to help filter the information and make it more consistent. Because really previous to that, we really only had the like wheelchair accessibility in that features clause. Otherwise and that was only if somebody knew enough to check it and make sure, your doors were wide enough and all of that. So um, it just takes a little bit more time, so.
Yesterday I was measuring a century home. The door widths are not by inches. Okay, yeah, 2/3,
Oh, yeah. It would be,
we just put in whatever came closest.
yeah. In that case, that's what you'd have to do. So for those online, Umi was just saying she was measuring a Century home the other day, and the door widths don't go to like a rounded inch like standard door sizes. So in that case, you just have to round to the nearest.
That's what I did.
Yeah,
But
that's all you can do.
completely true. It was the first time I've seen that.
Yeah.
Beautiful doors. They are
Yeah.
actual doors that
Yeah.
solid wood.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to replace that. How would you replace it?
Right? You'd have to do custom, right? Some,
It's a little
yeah.
worried.
Yeah. Or find a custom woodworker, mill worker to make your doors. Yeah, so that's that piece. Also make sure that all of your information is as correct as possible on your listing addendum, what goes on MLS, because obviously that's what goes out to the public. And gets through our IDX feeds, gets fed out to all the different websites publicly. So important also, if Alicia is activating your listing, when you send her everything, she will send you back a PDF of the listing cut. She won't activate it until you give her the go ahead and say, yes, everything's correct, or no, there's a typo here or here. Sure, you check that. Another best practice that I know some agents have implemented with that is they've also then forwarded the PDF of the cut to the client and have the client check it over as an extra set of eyes, fresh set of eyes, to make sure that everything's correct. Often your clients are paying attention, so they're usually looking online and like as soon as it's activated, because you're going to be in communication with them to say, we're going to list Friday or we'll hit the market Monday, and they're waiting anxiously to see it come up so they can share it with their friends and everything. So often they're looking, but on the off chance they're not, it doesn't hurt to have an extra step, a check-in for them to, verify. And then they may say, oh, we've got a propane fireplace. Well, it's not propane, it's wood. So, change that. You want to make sure your information is as accurate as possible. The other piece to the listing agreement is the PDS, the property disclosure statement. So another thing I will advise when you're dealing with a PDS, the seller has to complete it. You cannot touch the PDS at all. Cannot fill it out. You need to fill it out. That is a seller supplied document. The seller feels that you can help them, and as their agent, you should be guiding them. And if they have questions, you should be advising them on how to answer based on what their question is. But you cannot complete it. So either you're sitting with them physically at the kitchen table and they're filling it out, or if you're doing it digitally through DocuSign, they're doing it in the editable format electronically. That's fine as long as it's the seller that's completing it. You can't have already checked the boxes for them. They need to do it. They need to check the box. Yes, no, don't know, doesn't apply for all of the categories. And because that PDS is then going to be supplied to the buyer to sign off on. And they're relying on it being completed as the seller. So just make sure that, also important that you don't just throw the PDFs at them and have them complete it and not advise, because they need to have the opportunity to ask you questions. For some properties, there may be more things that need to be disclosed than others. and they may have questions around what they need to disclose. So you need to be there to guide and answer those questions. If you run into something really big or complicated and you're not sure how to advise them, then you need to call the broker. I'll give you an example of one. If there was an oil spill, that's one of the questions. Was it remediated? Da, 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 da. That's one of the questions. That's a pretty serious, significant item on a PDS that must be disclosed. If they're not sure how to answer a question, or, maybe they said, yes, there was an oil spill, but it was 2 owners ago. Well, you still need to disclose it. So if you're running into things that you're not sure of in that way, just please call the broker line and we'll guide you through those things. The other thing we have often questions around PDSs is if a property's been stigmatized. So we used to have years ago a clause you could put in the agreement from a buyer's perspective if it's been stigmatized, and you would list it. So when you're dealing with a buyer, if your buyer in your conversations has a concern about a death on a property, you need to be writing that in your agreement of purchase and sale. The seller does not have to put it in the PDS, especially if it was a natural causes. From a broker perspective, if you're dealing with any sort of stigmatization that's other than like a natural death, if there was a murder on the property, you should be disclosing that in the PDS. Unfortunately, that happens sometimes. So just make sure, again, if you come across strange things, please ask. Does somebody have their hand up? Can't see.
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
So I was just wondering, when you put the MLS on and you said we get to read the preview first, sometimes I see agents have, instead of an apostrophe, it makes like a dollar sign. So MLS changes it. Are we able to see exactly how it would look on MLS?
No, its feed comes from Paragon. So that could just be a issue with the coding and in how it goes through. But it's supposed to put, like, realtor.ca is the public MLS. It's supposed to pull exact from our side from Paragon. But if there is something odd in a symbol or character, just you can get Alicia to change it if you don't have input privileges on your listing yourself. Yeah, no, there isn't a way for you to actually see how it's going to show up.
Okay,
It's
great.
supposed to show, it's supposed to take exactly what's on Paragon, but that, you're right, it doesn't always translate exactly the same, especially if there's funny characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other question? The other thing I will talk about just around the listing side is lease or rented equipment. So that's the other piece of the listing agreement that comes up as part of your SDBA. And you would, if there is anything leased or rented, you would check leased equipment schedule that forms part of your agreement on your SDBA. That's another important conversation to have with your seller. So propane tanks are the common one we see that are rented. Every now and then a propane tank will be owned, but it's more often than not, your propane tank is rented. So make sure you ask, is the propane tank rented or is it owned? Rented? Oh, who is it through? Irving, Superior, Ultimate Home Comfort, and then you need to you need them to find their bill, fill out on the schedule of leased equipment, who it's rented through, what the term is, what the amount is, and the frequency, and whether it includes HST or not. That has to be completed because that is then that document, like the PDS, is provided to the buyer to sign. Because with the rentals, they take over the rental. Typically, that's how you're going to fill that form out. Alarm systems are another one that can become complicated. Especially if people have just had them installed. Often they don't own the equipment and there is a sort of rental or a lease agreement on the alarm system. So make sure you're checking that. But oil-fired hot water heaters are often rented, not owned. So that's another common one. A big one that we get into now are heat pumps. They did the financing through Nova Scotia Power. Often there is an agreement on the heat pumps and solar panels, the other big one. So those are potentially two very big ticket items, would have significant balances still owing depending on where they are in the process and the term of the program. So please make sure you're doing your due diligence. If they have solar panels or they have heat pumps, they're newer heat pumps that you're asking, are they owned? Are they leased? Are they financed? Are they rented? You need to know, you need to ask, and they need to then give you the specific information. If they're going to want the buyer to assume those contracts, you need to know that and you need to fill it out that way. If the seller's going to pay them out, with the heat pumps, you can see it go either way. Often some sellers will pay them out because they know that that's going to be a negative for a buyer to take it on. Some sellers can't afford to pay it out and the buyer has to take it on. So you need to have those conversations up front. Those are important. Same with the solar panels. Often the solar panels, it's a long-term investment. And if they've gone through those financing programs, there can be a significant amount of money still left owing. And if the seller's expectation is for the buyer to take that cost on, you need to have that conversation with them up front and make sure you know that. Those are just some points around the leased equipment schedule. And so those would be your most common, your 4 elements to your listing agreement. So you're going to have your seller designated brokerage agreement, your listing addendum, which is what goes on MLS, the leased equipment schedule, and your property disclosure statement. Here. If you're listing a different type of property other than a residential home, your listing addendum is not necessarily going to be the residential one. So there's a multi-unit addendum, there's multiple units. There's a land addendum if it's vacant land. So also make sure that you're using the proper addendum, you're listing it under the right category. So if you're not clear on that, please check with your mentor or your broker on duty, and we can walk you through what to do in those situations. Any questions around the listing agreement, listing process, documents? Oh, they're quiet. Okay, I'm gonna just pop over here and bring up the markets.
Resources, right?
Yeah, it's on where's that Paragon page? Yeah, through the market stats on Paragon.
Through resource. Market stats by showing that.
Yes, I think so. Let me.
For this market stats of the whole.
Okay. Yeah. So I was talking about this one. That's here. Everybody see that?
Doesn't tell you what.
Yeah. On market stats. So this is for the entire MLS for April. So closed price, you've got median and average. You can switch it. New listings. Homes for sale. Pending sales. Total sales. Is on market. There's a median and average. Average is typically what you're going to use. So for all of the MLS, which is all of Nova Scotia, we've got an average of 44 days on market right now. Month supply, so that's your month supply of inventory, we're sitting at 3.5 months supply. That means it would take 3.5 months for the inventory to turn over if all the inventory on the market were to sell. So we're up 0.9%. So if you've been following the stats, our month supply of inventory has been creeping up. We're still sitting more seller's market, but you can see it's very cyclical, right? Percent of list price, there's a median and average here you can click on. So it's your percent of list price for sale to list price. So 98.5%. So we're down 1.2%. I'm going too fast. You stop me, okay? Percent of original price, median, average. So we're seeing 97% of original price. So things are dropping on average 3%.
When you do it based on, like, let's say I'm listing a home in White's Lake, for example. What do you do it based on?
Yep, I'm going to show you that in just 1 second.
Based on district.
Yep.
So
So this is your MLA price per square foot, and your TLA price per square foot, average and median. Don't place a whole lot of value in a price per square foot determination of pricing myself, because it varies so much based on quality of construction, finishes, etc. So you're looking at a price per square foot and you're comparing a standard built home with, press board and normal insulation versus a home that's ICF. You're not going to see value in the price per square foot, but there is value in an ICF home that's far superior over just a standard home that's, not as energy efficient. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't always come down to a price per square foot, especially in a single family home, and you're going to get different quality of construction with different builders. So, I think that fine. Add dollar volume. Shows depending. This is a really great stat to have. We didn't have this before. This is a great thing to have, especially now that we're seeing things sit on the market longer. Often your sellers will say, like, what can I expect for a number of showings? Oh, and how many showings till I get an offer? Right now, shows depending for all of MLS is 9.7.
Melissa, so who drives that stat? Is that from the super data or?
I think they pull it from showing time. And shows per listing, because we didn't have that stat until we got showing time.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
It sounds like money.
Yeah. And then shows per listing. So let me just switch this over here again. So if we're going, I'm going to scroll up. So see, you have the different price ranges. So you can break it down by price point. You can break it down by single family or condo, bedrooms, bathrooms, sizes. I'm just generally looking at everything in all of MLS. So you can go add an area here. Then if you go drop down, you go district. Where did you say?
White's Lake.
Oh, that's district 40. Okay, so now we've pulled 40. And well, there's not really any condos there, but say there were, we only want single family because it's a house, right? So now we've got single family for area 40. So area 40 is the blue line. All of MLS is the green line, and it will show you the trends paired. So how that specific area is doing based on, and that's compared to all of MLS. So if you put closed price, your MLS closed price is $497. For area 40, you're at $646. So it's a significant difference. That's why it's nice. Overall stats are good to see larger trends. Breaking it down by area is, especially when you're looking at doing market evaluation or listing, it's much more useful for you. New listings. So your new listings, you're sitting at 54. And if you hit on any of these point. See, it'll give you the first, go backwards. But currently for April at 54 for new listings. For sale. So there's 109 homes for sale right now, so that's up 17% for area 40. Pending sales 41, so that's down 6.8%. Total sales is 34, so that's down 39%. Days on market, your average days on market, you're pretty close to what the entire MLS is experiencing. 45 days on market, just up 12%. So you can see that's trending up right now. Month supply. So you're sitting at 3 months supply. So that's a little better than all of MLS. And your percent of list price. You can see percent of list price is pretty strong. We've got some new construction in that area that would be influencing that, right? Percent of original price, the square footage, and then obviously then we've got dollar volume is down, shows depending. So they're sitting higher for shows depending at 11.8, shows per listing 5.6. Questions around the stats? This is a really useful tool. You can print these and share them as well. So this is right now 3-year trend. You can change that. You can change it from 1, 3, or 5. And then it auto sums it to monthly, which I find monthly is my preference. Prefer to see it based on, you can switch it to a rolling 3 months, rolling 6 months, or rolling 12 months. Rolling 3 is useful to have as well, just so you can see trends. Yeah, this is a really great tool that NSAR has come up with for us. And the nice thing is you can, like I said, you can print or share these graphs. So you could take that with you to your presentation as well. Show the client, especially when the market is shifting or you're seeing changes in the market. If people, sellers, are still kind of back in the, oh, you know, I think my house should be worth X because, you know, so-and-so sold their house for this much 2 years ago. Well, the market's very different now than what it was 2 years ago, right? We've changed it drastically even in the last 3 to 6 months. So when you are armed with this information to show them, you know, it helps your case stronger and it helps demonstrate that you're the market expert and that, you know, local economist, if you will, the area, which is important to show that value. Any questions about this? Helpful? Does that answer your question?
That Melissa things in here is to be able to set up your own areas,
Yes.
which if you have neighborhoods that have
Yes.
the homes in them, you can geographic.
So that's
you're
in
referring to
the-
your neighborhood
Add an area. So you could do that.
by area.
Yeah. So yeah. So if you wanted to search like a specific area, like I could go Bedford West, and I have that area broken out even more. Just really cool.
Being able
Thanks.
to draw it on the map is what it looks really.
Yes.
I see it all the time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data in here. It doesn't look like it.
It doesn't. Yeah.
You go digging, this is a well.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is. Thanks, Chris.
Let me get the. Because when you pull by districts, like that district, for instance, that's a big area.
Yes.
And even you take a little place where I live, like Sackville, it's like there's different markets in Sackville. You know that, you know, you're selling a middle Sackville, looks different than something old Sackville.
Yeah.
Like if you that, or the expert about anybody that just
Yeah.
no version of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But great.
Exactly. Other. Let's see. the other tool, just to be aware of, if you're not sure, aware, CRS data. It's a really cool spot to get some data from as well. So if you're looking for, so here's one I before. So a lot of this data you can get in Property Online, but say for example, the property's most recent sale was a private sale. We used to have a very hard time getting that pricing because it was a private sale and it would go through the Registry of Deeds and it wouldn't necessarily get published unless you could go through on Property Online and see the mortgage docs, and it was a lot more complicated to get it. Now with CRS, we can actually see a private sale and that price in the history. You search it by address or PID. This is one that I just searched. This is one of my listings. And I searched it. It's important to search it on Property Online when you're doing a listing because you have to make sure that the registered owners on title, on the deed, are who you're putting on your agreement. So always, always, always check Property Online. That's a must. But see, the CRS data has some extra things that is cool, and it's pulling from PVSD, which is our assessment site, and it pulls some really informative data. So you get the tax assessment, tax assessed value, and it gives you the percent change.
This would have to add on.
It could, yeah. We have the address, we can look it up. And it's in Halifax, Dartmouth region.
It's the zone it's in.
It says MU1. So that would be a multi-unit one. So you want to actually,
Oh, commercial, so this. You see that little corner cut out?
here,
Owner?
Oh.
There's two buildings on this. Residential, and there's also a garage. Same problem.
Okay.
So it's like residential. Very tricky to see.
yeah,
Of this thing. Like, got lowballed by developers that are developing across the street, huge.
Yeah.
Because they don't want those, they don't want the garage, they'd have to tear it down, but if someone were to want business in the house. These people like that,
yeah.
price. Like what do you tell
The easiest thing is probably to price it as residential and then add the value of the, that situation, that would be the best match to price it.
Like this?
Yeah.
It's so hard for me to.
Yeah, and it is when you get into those hybrid properties. Yeah, it is hard to do that. And sometimes it's not a bad idea in those situations to also suggest they get an appraiser come in, get an appraisal done, and then you can compare between you and the appraiser.
Well, I told him I was like, look. I trouble seeing based on.
Yeah.
Ask a few real. Ask a for. I just try to give them as much as possible.
Yeah, the issue is a lot of properties like that are what I would call smaller commercial. Most of the commercial realtors won't take that on because it's not a large enough commercial project for them because they're focusing on true commercial, right? Yeah, so when you're in sort of that mixed use, it makes it a little bit more challenging. But yes, my recommendation in those situations where more challenging is also to recommend they get an appraiser come in and do an appraisal. That also helps, or if they've had a bank appraisal done in the last, year or two, that can be helpful information as well, for you and for them in helping, said.
But it's a huge lot, like a huge potential. Right across the street, they don't even have, it's a huge unit going up, they don't even have. It's building yet. It's already being built. They're just paying fines.
They-
They don't care.
Where is?
Walker,
Where's it?
walk right off it's looking.
Any other questions?
They're just so stinking rich, they're so financing this.
Can't imagine they would put that kind of money in.
No,
No.
no, and HRM is known to shut people down pretty darn quick. HRM is not the easiest.
Developers across the
All right.
street off of 800. Their property. Multi-center.
Once a one person building a home. The single family home,
It's a single family, small, not enough bungalow, like.
that could.
So is there,
Pretty low ball.
I want to go back so far, because I've got, I'm with the buyer right now, we're buying a property, it was. A POL entry for 2005, but I can't find it on tax week. Go back.
Don't know how far it goes back. But this is another tool that's really, useful. Yeah. That's CRF data right on the dashboard.
Not that inside. So,
All right. Any other questions? Thing from Tanya or Nina online?
Is that inspection?